Hi, I'm Ashley.
And I'm Andrea, and welcome to Two
Two
Therapists and a
therapists in a
Cocktail.
cocktail, keeping it
Been it
real.
real. Yay! How are you, girl?
Girl, I am doing good. I'm still trying to get rid of this cold. There's a slight
Yes,
cough.
Lord.
But nonetheless, I'm doing good. Can you believe it's
Good.
Friday the 13th?
First of all, I did not know that, and now I'm going to be super paranoid the rest of the day.
No, 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 no. We're going to change the energy. Today is a
Ooh,
wonderful day.
it is. It is.
But
There were,
how are
you know
you?
what? I'm doing good. I went to Target today, my
Hmm.
favorite store, and I started my
Love
day off
Target.
with Starbucks. It's
Oh,
been a
good.
great day.
See?
Minus I still got some cleaning to do, but that's okay.
See the
It's okay.
energy. The energy is light and clean
Yeah.
and ain't no
Yes.
negativity over here.
No. No. Mm-mm, mm-mm. We gonna shoot that away. So what
That's
are we
right.
talking about today, though?
Well, y'all, our topic today is trauma in the name of Jesus.
Ooh.
Are y'all familiar with church hurt? I know
Ooh.
I am.
Same. Same. Same.
Hmm.
And so, like, when you say that, like church hurt, because I feel like there are a lot of different definitions for church hurt, but what definition are we going to be using for church hurt?
Well, when I think of church hurt, I just think of any pain that has been inflicted by a pastor, a leader of the church, or even the congregation, honey. So when I think of
Hmm.
church hurt, I think of that. What about you?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you gave that definition because when I asked that question, I didn't really know what I was going to say. But but
In the name of keeping it real.
in the name of keeping it real, because sometimes we ask questions and we don't even know what we finna say. But
Right.
I
Right.
really like that definition that you gave. Is really,
Hmm.
any kind of pain that you experience by a leader, by a pastor, and I think anyone who has a sense of responsibility in the church can be someone who invokes pain.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And then I wonder too how much of it is because you really have people that have been traumatized in the church.
Hmm.
But how much of it is there is unmet expectations?
Ooh.
You wanted to be the choir director or you wanted a certain position in the church
Hmm.
and you were denied of that. So now you mad with everybody.
Mm.
How much of it is that?
That's interesting because I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people think about that. Like,
Mhm.
they just think,
Mhm.
like, oh, it has to be like some kind of physical trauma, some type of emotional trauma. But that can be emotional trauma within itself. And
Yeah.
I got a rep for my fellow preachers kids out there. A lot of it can be expectations that people place on you that cause you to be
Ooh.
traumatized in the church.
Yeah.
Because I think
Yeah.
oftentimes, like, as preachers kids, you're constantly looked at on two different sides of the spectrum. It's,
Yeah.
oh, they know their Bible, they know everything, or, oh, that's a preacher's kid, they be acting real, but they
Right.
crazy, and
Right.
they be sleeping around, be drinking and acting crazy. And it's like,
Yeah.
when you experience either of those sides, you feel that. And that can
Mhm.
be emotionally traumatizing because you go out in the world and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to meet these expectations for people because if I am coming from my quote unquote safe space and they
Mm.
have those levels of expectation for me, I know the world is going to have these intense expectations for me as well. So
Yeah.
now you're coming from this place where you are supposed to be yourself, where you are
Mm.
supposed to let it all hang out because God is supposed to embrace you. There are leaders in the church who are supposed
Right.
to be these vocal pieces for the Lord, guiding you, being your shepherd in those spaces, but they're judging you and they're not
Right.
allowing you to be transparent and
Yeah.
just not meet expectations. And I think it's insane that, unfortunately, that is what a lot of churches are like. And I want to be very clear. when I'm speaking about like this toxic church environment, I am by no means saying like stop going to church, give up on God. Like I am not
Right.
meaning to
Yeah.
intend that at all. But what I am saying is there are a lot of people who have not worked through their own levels of hurt, people who are on ego trips in the church, who get a high out of judging people, and that has caused people to equate their behavior with what Christ is. And I
Right.
think that is really, really difficult. And it's really important that people digest that if you are religious, right?
Yeah.
But it's really, really important to make that distinction because you will continue to deal with this church hurt, and
Right.
inevitably you'll begin being mad at God.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think
And and
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and I think a lot of people equate church hurt to God hurt me too,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know? And
yeah,
so I guess my question is what do you think is a toxic church environment? Because that does exist, whether we
yeah,
like it or not. Because
yeah,
what we know the church to be is it's a group of people that are hurt, that are wounded themselves. So what makes a church have a toxic
like
environment?
characteristic, yeah, toxic environment.
Yeah.
I think when they're, and I think when we're saying like words like toxic, I think people need to really digest in their mind that toxicity isn't just a definition that you can only apply to one space, right?
Right.
So if you think about toxic, that can go anywhere.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think a toxic church environment in any environment is when there's a lack of accountability, when people cannot take
Yes.
responsibility on things that they're doing to people,
Yeah.
and when someone calls you out and you try to deflect or you try to gaslight them
Right.
into
Right.
pushing them towards your perspective. I think that's when it becomes toxic. And when
Yeah.
you realize that you have stepped into an experience and you end up coming out worse than when you came in, that's when
Okay.
you realize that it's toxic.
Yeah.
When you're sicker and you're sick of
Yes.
them, okay?
You're not lying.
You're sick and you're sick.
You're sick and you're sick and tired.
And you're
Okay?
sick and tired. Yeah.
So when I think of toxicity in the church environment, I think about jealousy. There's envy, people gossiping, spreading rumors. Like, girl, why she got on that short dress? I know, 'cause she over there messing with Mr. Thomas and Mr. Thomas married. And before you know it, that's
Always
all
be
around.
calling asking for single prayer. What she
Right,
need one-on-one prayer for?
right. And before you know it, that's all around the church.
Absolutely.
Then there's judgment. I know what she was last night, but yet I'm supposed to come as I am.
That part. That part. That part.
But
And
yeah, but you judging me about my life, which everybody has a journey, y'all.
everybody.
We all have a journey, and just because my journey doesn't look like yours, doesn't mean that I'm a bad person.
That part. That part.
They gotta figure it out just like you had to figure it out. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in particular, when we are talking about the black church, we have lost sight. We have lost sight of what the black church is supposed to be. This was a place, if we're thinking about historically where we started,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
used, as a people, black people would come together on the day off they had from the plantation and
Yeah.
heal together, connect together, because they were
Yeah.
all, even though they might have had different roles, on the plantation, right? They were coming together as a people to share in an experience, to comfort each other. We have since gone away from that. Now, going to church is a popularity contest. Who's
Right.
wearing what? Oh, she with
Right.
him. Oh, when they getting married. It's all of these life updates from a
Yeah.
judgmental standpoint. And we have lost sight of what church is supposed to be. Henceforth, making it more toxic.
Yes.
And
Yes.
if we really want to get into it, if we talking about being real, and we're talking about how in our families how we don't talk about certain secrets, sometimes the church be the breeding ground for secrets, and we don't want to
Right.
call people out. And we don't
Right.
want to talk about how so and so is sleeping with so and so, and how no one is calling out that misbehavior.
Right. Right.
No
Or
one's doing it.
pastor is touching on people's children.
That
Or
part.
or deacon is touching on people's children. Or
That
Mr.
part.
So and so, Miss So and so, because women sexually abuse
Women do
children
it.
too, is touching on so and so. But nobody wants to talk about it. And especially when everybody puts, and I'm going to go there, everybody puts the pastor on a pedestal.
That part. Buying him jets.
Right.
Said it.
Right. They put him on a pedestal. So we don't want to rock the boat.
And if we want to be real, sometimes we put the pastor ahead of God.
Okay? I think that's exactly what's happening. That is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we're thinking about like this church hurt that happens to kids, I feel like sometimes they are a silenced community in the church. If something happens to the kid, it's because the kid was acting crazy. It's because the kid was loose.
Or
And they were
grown.
trying, or grown. They was acting grown, or they real mouthy. Or if we're gonna really say something, oh, they were gay.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
we shouldn't do that. We got to pray that demon away for them. And
Yeah.
we're outing kids as if they don't
Yeah.
have feelings.
Right.
There is someone that I knew. There is
Yeah.
a young kid in my youth ministry. Great kid, great potential. Just loved being there. And
Yeah.
his parents had no idea of his sexuality, and everyone knew that. Everyone knew that. And there was a leader that decided to out him.
Wow.
And that was the day, and that's only one of the church hurts that
Yeah.
we'll kind of get into. But that was the day that I really lost respect for one of those leaders, because especially when it comes to kids, you're there to protect them. This is their
Right.
space. This is their
Right.
space. And oftentimes when they come to youth ministry, they are coming with some things that they have not shared with their
Right.
families yet.
Yeah.
And you're their guide. You are supposed to be the representative of Christ, and you're mishandling that. And I think
Yeah.
that is why church hurt impacts people so much. Because, and you're thinking about, okay, you're being vulnerable, you're letting it out. And when you're vulnerable, everybody can see your
Yeah.
weak spots. And
Yeah.
what does that teach you once someone betrays that I can't trust
Yeah.
nobody?
That's right. That I can't talk and verbalize and communicate what's going on in here. Especially, kids that are teenagers that are trying to figure out who they are. We were all there. 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, trying to figure out who I am. And sometimes you don't know that till you in your 30s.
Hello.
And so when somebody takes something like that and uses it against you, you now have learned that I can't trust anybody.
Yeah.
You
So do
now
you?
have learned that I have to be a certain way for me to be loved. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
conditional love is happening in the church.
Ooh. Say more about that.
Conditional
Say it.
love.
Say it.
So when I
Say
think
more.
about conditional love, I think about I'm only loved when I do what you want me to do, or if I live my life how you want me to live my life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm 18, not married, and I'm pregnant, you're mad at me.
Mm-hmm.
You judge me. Now you don't want nothing to do with me. But at first it
Mm-hmm.
was, come as you are. More than ever, I need guidance.
Mm-hmm.
More than
And a
ever, I
village.
need love. And a
Mm-hmm.
village.
And a village.
More than ever. But now,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm pregnant and
Mm-hmm.
unmarried, now
Mm-hmm.
it's, we
You've
don't want nothing
disowned
to
me.
do with her. Right.
Mm-hmm.
You are
Mm-hmm.
committing sin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, a lot of that
So,
happens. Yeah.
yeah. Do you
Hmm.
think it's fair to call it like church hurt? Like I think a lot of questions that people are gonna have with this is the location of the hurt happened at the church, right? But
Hmm.
technically, like it's a person doing these actions. So
Yeah.
can we call it church hurt, or do we call it like church people hurt? Like
Hmm.
what do you think it is? Are there different levels? Like how do we distinguish that?
I definitely think that it could be a combination of both. For some people, it's this one person did this to me. For another set of people, it might be the whole church. Like
Yeah.
the culture of the whole church really
Mm-hmm.
traumatized me.
Yeah.
And this is why I don't feel comfortable going back
Yeah. Yeah.
at all
Yeah.
at any
Yeah.
church
Yeah.
because of that,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
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 Hmm.
And I'm glad that you said that because just like if you do poorly at school, right? You're going to like remember that your teacher maybe gave you a bad grade, but you're going to condition it in your mind to say I hate school. Like you're not going
Right.
to say something like you hate teachers. Like you're going to say I hate school. So
Yeah.
I think when we get hurt in the church by a person, we do condition our brain to say that's a church hurt.
Yeah.
Um, how do you think
Mm.
church hurts affect the black community?
Ooh, child.
We
Now we getting
already,
deep.
a lot of us are already be acting like crabs in a bucket anyway,
Uh, okay.
always pulling each other down.
Okay.
And where you think we learned that?
You right
Mm-hmm.
about that?
Mm-hmm.
I
Because
think
because
yeah,
church is on Sunday, and you're supposed to be learning all your lessons. So then when you
right.
go out in that world and you've been
Hmm.
talking about people at church all
Right.
Sunday
Yeah.
for the 45 hours we be sitting there, what you think you gonna do on Monday when you see Sarah with the same shirt she was wearing on Tuesday? You
Like,
like,
ooh,
there she
girl.
go. Oh, did you
I thought
pray?
she wore that Sunday. What's she wearing on Tuesday
Why
again?
she wearing
First of all,
that again?
do you know Sarah's situation? Do you know if Sarah is struggling to find a job? But she's still
Mm,
showing up she's still showing up on at church because her faith is strong in God.
mm,
And that is
mm,
what matters, not what she got
mm,
on.
mm,
But
mm,
I think it affects the black community because we were learning not to trust other people. This whole idea of the village is being dismantled.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
dismantled. Let's
It
keep
is
it real.
dismantled. It's dismantled.
You
Yeah.
don't trust nobody anymore. And now you are wounded. You are
Mhm.
hurt.
Mhm. Mhm.
We already established that. I heard this the other day that the church is supposed to be like a hospital.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a bunch of wounded people in the church. So if we understand that, we know that hurt people hurt other people. And y'all, we're not saying that it's okay because I'm hurt. I'm
Yeah.
just, well, I'm going to hurt you anyway because I'm hurt. No. But
Yeah.
at least we have some understanding of human beings. We are liable to hurt anybody,
Yeah.
even family.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's how are we going to deal with that?
Yeah.
Who's going to take accountability? Are we going to say, "Hey, you said this and that really hurt my feelings," or are we not going to address it? And now
Mhm.
I ain't coming no more.
Yeah. And I think it's
Yeah.
really, really important as a way to really encourage others. You do not have to be silenced. Even
Right.
like sometimes your leaders are immature. Sometimes
Yes.
they have worked their way up to the top because they know somebody, if we want to be honest. And
Right.
they don't have the schooling to be where they are. So,
Yeah.
if you are in church, open your Bible.
Yeah.
And if you want to bring an issue to somebody, you meet with one first. That's what the Bible says.
Right.
Meet with the person one on one. If they don't want to listen, you bring in somebody else. If that person don't want to help you, you bring it to the church. You do not have to remain silent in that
That's
space.
right.
And I feel like the pandemic has really taught a lot of people your voice matters. You don't have to be
Yes.
silent. You don't have to be
Yes.
silent anywhere. And
Yes.
so take that and find
Yeah.
somebody. And honestly, if that church ain't serving you, go to another church. Go to another
You
church.
know what? I'm glad you said that, Andrea, because not every church is for you.
No,
Not every church is for you.
no, no. And,
If it's
and
not
yeah,
feeding you spiritually,
thank you.
it's not for you, boo.
Yeah. And granted,
Yeah.
you might have some friends at your church, but are you trying to hang out? Like, it is okay if we all know that we're getting out at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock for some churches. Um, if we all know that we gonna be in church forever, right?
Yeah.
You can go to brunch after and
Yeah.
talk about your different services. You
Yeah.
don't need to be a seat filler in church.
That's right.
If that place isn't for you, you can leave. Go to
Right.
another place that better serves you. Because
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on your level of spiritual growth, you are able to see through a lot of nonsense people are talking about in church. And you're
Yeah.
like, you know what? Y'all's values, even though we Christian, our values
Right.
aren't aligning. So I'm gonna need to
Right.
go. I need to get on out of here.
Yeah.
And that and free yourself from that expectation of having to stay in one church for 25 years.
Right.
Baby, the only thing that you done learned is that if you are not there by 8:55, somebody will be in your seat, even though you
Right.
sat in that same spot for years. How dare
Yes.
they?
Yeah.
That's the only thing. And it becomes super routine. And sometimes you are so used to the comfort of just being in the same spot that you have not realized that you have plateaued on your spiritual health.
Okay.
But we ain't getting into that. We talking about church hurts. But I'm
Right.
just saying. Some of
Yes.
y'all are so routine in just going to church. And you're so
Yeah.
numb to the hurt that you've experienced.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so the next question is it the church's responsibility to protect you? What do you think about that?
I think that's difficult. I think it's difficult. I
Yeah.
think that when you are called to ministry, you have to be very mindful of what that means for you. And you
Yeah.
are called to protect God's sheep. You are the shepherd. And I think
Yeah.
if you are going through something, like for example, I was in youth ministry, okay? And I decided to do that after I had a really great camp experience. And I went
Yeah.
away for like a month and a half, and I was doing ministry, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this like full time. I'm gonna work at the church. I'm gonna do this youth ministry while I'm still kind of balancing life or whatever. But I had to arrive at that space and grow and work
Yeah.
through a lot of the trauma that I had experienced in the church that I was
Yeah.
going to serve at.
Yeah.
And I think if a lot of people don't work through that, they are going to end up mishandling people and
Oh,
hurting
yes.
them. And so
Yes.
I think you, there is a little bit of responsibility there, and you're not always going to protect someone because we're human, we're flawed.
Right.
Even everybody, like if you have to care for a dog, or if you have to care for a child or care for your older parents, you're going to do something and you're going to make a mistake. But I
Yeah.
think you have to take ownership of that mistake and
Yeah.
say, I failed right there when I should have been
Yeah.
protecting you. But when you don't even make that level of acknowledgement, that's when we continue to damage and hurt and cause people
Yeah.
to turn away. So
Yeah.
I think there's some level of responsibility there to protect somebody,
Yeah.
but you also have to have that expectation that you're not going to be able to protect them 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you. I do think that leadership has a responsibility. Um, but there ain't nothing more hurtful than wounded people trying to help other people but end up hurting them as well while putting Jesus on it.
Say it.
We need to be careful of that. We need to be very careful of that. And so I agree with you about you need to check yourself. If you are wounded or in pain or in hurt, in the season of hurt, because there's seasons, y'all. That might be the season right now. You don't need to be helping nobody but you right now.
Yourself. But yourself. Yeah.
You need to figure that out first
Yeah.
before you can harm anybody else, because that leads to hurting other people when you don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you said that. So I think a lot of times, again, so I know previously I mentioned that sometimes different church people in leadership be on ego trips, and
Okay.
they realize that
Yeah.
they are going through some pain, they are
Yeah.
being triggered, there is some kind of trauma that they haven't worked through.
Yeah.
But they are so connected, like their identity is tied into this role at their church,
Yes.
that they don't want to take a sabbatical and sit down and sit down somewhere. Okay? So when you see that, what do you think people are supposed to do? Because I think that's hard. Like, what if it's your pastor? What if you see
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
What are you supposed to do?
Andrea, that's a good one. That is a good one.
But
I think
why
that's when,
yeah.
I think that's when the congregation needs to come together and be like, "Look, we need to have a meeting with pastor. We need to have a meeting with bishop. We need to have a meeting with the deacon or whoever and figure this thing out, because
Yeah.
ego tripping hurts other people.
For sure. And
It does.
Again,
Yeah.
And again, because sometimes the deaconship low key be a fraternity.
Okay.
And we wanted to protect the pastor at all costs.
Yes.
And if that happens, if you are in that case where you realize that there are leaders in the church that are not working through their own things, again, the church is a building.
Yes.
It's a building. So you
It
need to
is.
really refocus, and maybe you spend some time in your word alone.
Yeah.
And you ask for Christ to lead you and decide
Yeah.
where you should go. If you should say,
Yeah.
because sometimes you do have to be that voice that pushes the buttons and says,
Right.
I don't think we should do this. And a lot of times there will be some bigger voices, right, that try to make people see you in another way. Like, they're attacking the church, they are going against our principles and all of that. But let me tell you this. they are raggedy, and don't back down.
Yes.
You don't have to,
Yes.
you don't have to do that. You don't have to back down
Yeah.
just because somebody has a bigger voice. Maybe you just need
That's
a
right.
mic so that
That's
your
right.
voice can be louder too.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
I say that because, again, I'm a preacher's kid. And very, very early on, like, I feel like I am the child that says a lot of things that are out of pocket sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, when I was a teenager, I was very quick to be like, I need a therapist. Something is wrong with me. And so, my parents have always expected the unexpected from me. So,
Yeah.
even like when different things were happening, like at church, I always had questions. And I was like, why do we do this? Why do they treat us this way? This is, I don't
Yeah.
like it. And I wanted to make sure that teens felt that way too. Like, you can
Right.
question stuff that don't make sense. That doesn't mean you're being disrespectful, but it means
That's
that you're
right.
saying something, and you can say something. Like, say something while you can.
Yeah.
While you can. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I'm glad you brought that up. This idea of being disrespectful. Because I'm speaking my truth, or because you don't want me to tell the truth? Which one is it? You know? That affects the black community too.
Yeah. And
It's like children don't have a space to talk or say what they need to say.
yeah.
Let them say it, but also teach them how to say it
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
Because there's a way to say something. I mean, we've talked about this before. There's a way to say something, and you don't have to be disrespectful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Them saying it is not disrespectful. It's how you say it. You know.
And some of y'all gonna be offended today. And maybe
You just might be.
and maybe you need to check why you're offended. Check that.
That
What
part.
is it? Is it tapping
Yeah.
something that's a weak spot to you?
Yeah.
Maybe it's how you have impacted somebody else.
Yeah.
And we're hitting that button for you. A lot of times
That's
when
right.
people speak out in the church, and kind of survey people around, and try this out. This be another homework assignment for y'all out there.
Yes.
Say something to somebody, and if they're quick to get offended, ask them why. What did that
Right.
do for you? What did that bring up for you?
That's
Because
right.
if someone is so quick to get offended, you know that is something that they have not worked through yet.
Yeah.
They haven't worked through that. And
Yeah.
and that will give you your answer alone. Like, ooh, they're not ready to work through this. There's
That's
something else
right.
in the background. This response has nothing to do with me.
That's right.
This response
right.
is based off of something else. And I'm going to pray
And that-
for you from a distance.
Yeah. Yeah. And that really taps into mental health. There's a lot of people, because of being hurt by members of the church or being church hurt, that experience a lot of depression,
Yeah.
anxiety. They're fearful now. They can't trust nobody. They're suicidal. And this idea of losing a community that they once had, that really, really affects your mental health. Not feeling supported, not feeling safe in a place that you would think you would be safe. Isn't church supposed to be safe?
Since we're talking about mental health as well, can we talk about how the black church just decided that mental health was okay?
Oh,
It's okay
let me
to
sip
love
my
Jesus
water.
and have a therapist? Oh, we can have a therapist and love Jesus?
okay,
Oh, we
Okay.
don't just have to pray it away now?
okay,
Because I think
Okay.
that's something. Like,
Yep.
when we're talking about depression, when we're talking about suicide, when we're talking about anxiety, early 90s, black people didn't want to talk about that at church.
exactly,
Throw
exactly.
that away.
You
Ooh, that's
you
the
know,
devil.
You know, I
Because
heard.
God isn't a God of fear. We shouldn't be.
Yeah.
The Bible say be anxious for nothing. Okay.
Right.
So
Yes.
I don't know what to do with that though.
Yes. I heard this when I went to Women Thou Art Loose last year. It was Bishop T.D. Jakes' last Women's Thou Art Loose conference, which I thoroughly enjoyed. He said, prayer is a tool, but therapy is a strategy.
Come on.
When I heard that, I was like, you better preach.
Come on.
Yes.
Come
Therapy
on.
should be used as a strategy. And the way I look at it, God put people on this earth to be therapists.
Yeah.
So why not
Use
go?
them. Use
Get some
them.
help.
Please.
So the church is supposed to help you spiritually, right?
Right.
The therapist is going to help you mentally and emotionally, just like your doctor helps you physically.
Uh-huh.
So, honey, there's a doctor for everything.
Hello.
If we're talking about whole health, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, there's somebody for each of those aspects of you that makes you you. And when one thing is off, what do we know happens? You're off.
Yes.
If you're not together spiritually, that's going to affect you mentally and emotionally and physically. If you're not together mentally, that affects you emotionally and
'Cause that's-
physically.
That is your brain. That's your
That
brain.
is your brain.
I don't understand how people don't realize that when we're talking about your mental health, we're talking about your brain. Your brain.
Yes.
And different things that you're dealing with in your chemistry, in your brain, your neurons, your synapse, all those things. Those impact
Yes.
your emotions. If there was a
Yes.
tumor in your brain, now prayer helps. We already said that. We already made that real clear. But you not finna go to a neurologist?
Okay. Okay. What do we know for all those that are religious folk? Prayer without works is what? Ain't it dead?
Dead.
So isn't there action that needs to be taken into consideration? You have to do your part. You want God to fix it all, but what are you doing? What are you doing to change that?
You know what just popped up in my mind?
Yeah.
What if the reason why the black community in the church was so against people going to see therapists was because it was going to blow their spot up.
Ooh.
That people in the church have been hurting people.
Yes.
What if that's why they were doing it all along? Like, no.
Yes.
We don't go see therapists. We don't talk
Yeah.
about that.
We
Because
don't
if
go
they
tell
had
our
go-
business.
We don't do that. You better
Yeah.
pray it away.
Yeah.
Because if you pray it away, right, and you're talking to
Yeah.
God gonna tell somebody? That is between you and the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no one who can account for that. But if you
That's
were
right.
going to a therapist and you were like, yeah, that deacon touched me, that'd have blown up the whole spot.
It sure would.
What if that is why the black community in the church was like, no, we don't do that.
And what do we know about our community? They don't want no. We don't want to be looking like. You're not gonna have me looking like no fool.
You're not gonna have me looking crazy.
Okay, that is it right there. That's why they don't want us talking about. I remember as a kid, and this is no shade towards my parents, but being told whatever happens in this house stays in this house. Who's heard that before? Whatever happens in this house stays in this house. You learn that anything that happens that's negative we don't talk about. You don't tell nobody about that. That's our business. And not that I was abused as a child. I wasn't. But if you come from a household where you were abused and you were told that, you were being taught not to talk about it. And what does that do? When you're still faced with the person that abused you, that's still coming to the family cookout, that's still coming to the family functions and the Christmas party and the birthday parties and the anniversary parties and the family reunions. And we could go on and on and on, because that in itself is a whole podcast itself.
Yep. Yep.
You know?
We love to talk about antidotes for healing, but we're comfortable
Yes.
in our hurt.
Mm,
We're comfortable
okay.
there. We're
Okay. And maybe
comfortable
that's
there.
it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's it. We are
Yeah.
so comfortable in our hurt that the thought of talking about it, that the thought of going to see a therapist, that the thought of facing it disturbs you. That you'd rather be quiet and live in that. What a life to live. And I don't think you're really even living
No.
when you do that.
No. And
Yeah.
that's how that church hurt continues to flourish. Because we have
Yes.
people who have silenced us on one end, make us fearful of speaking out, saying things like, oh, well, you can just pray away that hurt, and, just be mindful, get you a good devotional, do a fast. Maybe you need to fast. Maybe you need to starve so that you can get some clear thoughts in your mind. You're eating too much. That's the problem. Maybe you need to do that. And so there's people like that on one end. And then you got the people who are so comfortable in church. And
Yeah.
even though you are amongst the raggediest of the raggedy, you are
Yeah.
comfortable there because that is the only village maybe you know. And then you have people who just don't know what to say. And they're just so
Yeah.
traumatized that they're just like, well, maybe this is what it's supposed to be. Maybe
Yeah.
this is my storm. And I haven't got through the storm yet, but it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
And that's how this church hurt continues to recycle itself
It
over and
does.
over again. Because we're not speaking. We talk
Yeah.
about hurt. We talk about people being a mess. But we don't do enough to say, when does it
Yeah.
stop? When does it
Yes.
stop?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 Nobody gets hurt by anybody that's whole.
Yeah.
You get hurt by people who are broken. You do.
Yeah.
And so it's, and am I gonna allow this to keep me down,
Yeah.
or am I gonna allow this to help me to grow
Yeah.
and be a bigger version of myself?
Yeah.
This is what I need y'all to remember, y'all. You have choices. You have power. And you can get your power back by speaking your truth. And not just sitting in the trauma and sitting in the pain. That's how you get your power back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Them people don't have power over you if you let them, if you give it to them. You know?
Don't be so quick to give it away. No matter what
That's
age
right.
you are. No
That's
matter what
right.
age you are. Is
Yeah.
there a time where you have felt unsafe in the church? And how did that impact your mental health?
Ooh, child. You know, it's funny you asked that question because I do. You know, so as I've explained in previous podcasts, you know, my family being from Belize in Central America, you know, I grew up as Episcopalian. So that's a branch of Catholicism. I went to Catholic schools, but I've always been a child of God because I've always felt God in my life. Nobody has really had to teach me that. But when I came to Valdosta State for college and I was in my master's program, I went to this church that a group of us friends in my master's program we started going to. And for the first time in my life, I felt the Holy Spirit. I feel like that, like I was being fed spiritually. And, you know, I graduated the master's program, stayed here in Valdosta, and I was dating a guy at the time, and we were talking a lot about marriage. And yes, we were living together.
Okay.
But you know, in the church, depending on where it is, that is frowned upon. But they always talked about come as you are.
Yeah.
So we were talking about getting married. We were talking about finding a church,
Okay.
becoming members. So I introduced him to this church, and he loved it just like I did. So we became members on the church, and in order to become a member, you had to fill out like a form and give like your address and all of that.
Okay.
Everybody was so kind and everything until we became members. And what I mean by that is the pastor had a whole sermon about there being two members of the church living together unmarried.
He did not.
And when I tell you, he sure did. And when I tell you, Andrea, the church was small. Everybody knew everybody. So who else they talking about? And the minute he did that sermon, and you know, after church, you know, pastor goes to, you know, outside, greets everybody. He says to us, you know, my boyfriend was trying to talk to him. He just shook our hand and was walking away while he shook our hand. He's like, just keep coming to church. That really, in that moment, that broke me, because it was like, did this really happen? He had a whole sermon. I felt ashamed. I felt judged.
Yeah.
And I felt like, did I make the right decision by becoming a member of this church? And then on top of that, there's a packet that you get when you become a member. And one of the, I don't know if it's a policy, a rule, whatever it is you want to call it. One of the things on there was every member had to pay a $500 pastor fee.
A pastor fee? What's that for?
To
his
give
dad?
to give to give to the pastor and his wife as appreciation. Now,
Get a
mind you,
salary.
I just came out of the marriage and family therapy program.
Yeah.
What money, because I wasn't making a lot of money back then.
And we don't.
And we don't. What money did I have to pay $500 a year? I'm over here trying to pay my bills
Your rent.
and rent. I still went, Andrea. I still went even after that. This is what
Ashley.
I know. This is what made me stop going.
Jesus.
What made me stop going was, and I would go Wednesday night Bible study. I would go Sunday. I even wanted to help out in the different ministries. I was even thinking like, oh, I'm a therapist. Maybe these are services I can provide within the church to help the members. I was thinking that big.
Wow.
But the thing that got me, that made me end up stop going was, he had a sermon about we're not tithing enough. We're not tithing enough, and we should be tithing in order to keep these bills paid in the church. I said, you know what? This must be God's sign or God's message telling me it's time to go, boo-boo. It's time to go.
Wrap this up.
And you know what? You would think because you're members of the church and that when a member stop going, because when a member gets sick, they check up on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
They didn't check up us on none. We didn't get a phone call. We didn't get a text. We didn't get an email. When we left, we didn't get nothing.
And you said
So
the church
it's-
was small, so they could tell y'all weren't there.
They could tell that we weren't there. We didn't get nothing. And I just felt like the energy, and y'all know how that feels when the energy shifts and change and people's behavior change towards you. It changed. I no longer felt welcomed anymore. I no longer felt safe anymore.
Wow. Wow.
And so there's a difference between one person that does something to you
Yeah.
and then you notice a shift in the energy in the whole church. To this day, I left. This is years ago, probably 8 years ago. I have left, and I have not heard nothing
From
from
not
these
one
people.
member.
Not one member.
Well, let me say
Oh.
what I'm gonna say. Y'all all raggedy. So if y'all see this in Valdosta, Georgia, y'all raggedy. Repent.
And let me add this, y'all. This is the thing that got me. I signed up to participate in certain ministries, especially like youth. Because I love the kids. I was working at kids at the time. Love the kids. Because we were not married and we lived together, we were not allowed to help in any ministry, y'all.
What?
But come as you are, as long as you assimilate to what we believe. So that really put a damper, and I have to keep it real, that really has put a damper in as to why I don't go to church.
Yeah.
Now I trust God, and maybe this had to happen because after that my relationship with God got stronger than ever. There's nothing in this world or nobody in this world that can shake my faith. So yes, I'm currently still dealing with that hurt, if we're gonna keep it real. But by me, and this is just my opinion, I enjoy watching Bishop T.D. Jakes. Yes, I'm not in Dallas, but I will sit here at home and watch him on a Wednesday and Sunday and feel fulfilled.
There you go.
And just because I'm not a member of a church right now doesn't make me a heathen, doesn't mean I'm going to hell, doesn't mean that I'm a bad person. This is my journey. This is my journey. And wherever God is guiding me into finding a new church, then it'll happen. But never let a human being bring you down, especially anybody in the church.
That part.
Right. So yeah, that's my story. That is my story, and still healing from it.
Still healing.
Because we keeping it real. Still healing from it. And it takes time.
Yeah.
But God got me.
There you go.
As he always does.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you said that your relationship with God got stronger after that, because I think a lot of times we are so quick to just connect him to our experiences at church, the people, and all of that, and we'll turn away. And there could be some listeners
Yeah.
out there that have turned away and are like, no, like so mad, he would never have set me up like that. And a lot of times, and that's very easy to fall into.
Yeah.
And like, I hope that this podcast like really just helps you to realize that there are two people at least who are keeping it real, to let you know
Yes.
that you can fall in different parts of that journey, but never be so quick to over associate God with the church, because like we said earlier,
Yeah.
that is just a building, and
Yes.
it is a hospital for hurt people.
Yes.
God is the ultimate doctor. So
Yes.
do not let these people shift you away
Yeah.
from this relationship that you have with him, because you will get far more healing when you connect with him versus any
That is
deacon
right.
or youth leader or pastor that is there.
That is right. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I get that. I get this idea of you wanting a community, and there's nothing wrong with that. But make sure that you do your work in finding that community, because like I said before, not every church is for you.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
And especially when we
Yeah.
got, I don't know about Houston, honey, but what I do know about Valdosta is every corner there's a church. If that's not telling, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Why is there a church on every corner?
Right.
What's going on here?
And if we wanna be for real, y'all, there are some churches that serve different people. Like there are
That's
some
right.
churches that are just for babes in Christ, that are
Yeah.
newly baptized, that are just happy to be there and just
Yeah.
wanna like get into it, right? But then there
Yeah.
are some churches that are more mature, that are for people who are really trying to dig and just gain knowledge and all of that. And then there are some churches that are for seat fillers. You
Yeah.
might not get anything from that, but you might get a community. And so
Right.
you really have to know like what you're going for. And also, y'all,
Mm.
do not fall into the trap of going to a church where you realize everybody got the same issue as you, and y'all are just swapping war stories. That
Okay.
means you're not going anywhere and you're not growing.
Yeah.
And sometimes we fall into situations like that where we're swapping war stories and we realize, oh my gosh, we have so much in common. This is my community. This is where I should be. But are you growing?
Right.
If you're not growing, and if you realize that you just feel like you just maybe had a therapy session, but you didn't
Right.
get no homework,
Mm.
check whether you should be there or not.
That's right.
That
That's
might
right.
be your brunch, your lunch bunch. hang out
Right.
At
Right.
on 3 o'clock on a Sunday. But
Right.
that's not maybe the place that you need to be.
Right. And you know what? I think that's with anything. If the church ain't feeding you spiritually, you might need to find something else.
Yeah.
If your therapist ain't giving you what you need mentally and emotionally, you might need to find someone else. Because as the church, every church ain't for everybody. Every therapist ain't for everybody.
That's
If your doctor, your physical doctor, your primary care ain't doing what they need to do, then you need to find somebody else.
Yes. And we
And
definitely
that's
need to
okay.
make that for sure to be known for our people of color listeners.
Yes.
There is such a high mortality rate, especially for you black women out there. Like, if your doctor is not getting what you need,
Right.
please go find a better doctor who knows
Yes.
the mortality rates for black women and who
Yes.
is always going to find the best option that does not require you to be sliced and diced open on no table.
That is right.
Please
That is right.
find a doctor that advocates for you, because the mortality rates for black people is
Yes.
just too high. And it is,
Yes.
we are dying by the hands of doctors that are ill-trained for
That's
our
right.
population. I
That
said
is
it.
right.
Say
History is telling. It's happened before. That's another podcast, though.
That's another podcast.
But history is telling, and so We don't need to repeat history.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
Speak up, y'all. It's okay to
Please.
do that. We are telling
Please.
you it's okay to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you don't speak up, that affects your mental health. That affects you every aspect. Mental, physical, spiritual, emotional, mental. It affects it all.
Mm-hmm.
Speak up,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know. Yeah.
Yeah. I know, like, we've been talking, like, a lot about, like, church hurt, and I definitely know that this conversation alone might leave some of our listeners maybe wanting more to talk about this and unpack it more, but I also, like, want to leave in this space of giving some tips as well. I think
Yeah.
something that, like, really helped me with my church hurt, and mine really happened when I was a teenager. Like, basically, I was shamed for behaving poorly on a trip with, I'm gonna call him my boyfriend,
Yeah.
with my boyfriend. And
Okay.
the youth leader had basically said that she needed to speak to my mother at the conclusion of the trip. And so I'm like freaking out, like on the bus and blah, blah, blah. And so she talks to my mom, and I'm present at the time. And she shames me. She's like, oh, she's acting loose. You need to get a handle on her. She's just so boy crazy, and all of these other really demoralizing ways to describe a young black lady, right?
Yeah.
And then I later find out she did not have a conversation with the young man's parents at
Ooh.
all.
But
At all.
you though.
But me though, because I'm at fault. I'm at fault.
But he's not.
Right. Because boys
Yeah.
will be boys, right? We don't. That's another
That's a
podcast.
whole podcast.
I had to
Yep.
center myself. But I think a tip that I really used in that moment, and I had a lot of moments in my teenage life that really kind of made me decide that the best way that I can heal from this is to help others and to encourage people
Yes.
to use their voice. And I think that
Yes.
is the only way that I've been able to heal. Like when I hear
Yeah.
about girls that are being shamed for
Yeah.
being expressive, for
Yeah.
saying how they feel, for flirting, for flirting.
Yeah.
I always try to make sure I'm an advocate for them, because you are
Yeah.
not finna shame this girl for doing the
Right.
same thing that boys do every day, but y'all excuse
That's right.
that behavior. And
Yes.
I think that's what made me heal from it. And by saying to these young girls, because I think a lot of what happened to me in the church was really tied around me needing to be affirmed, right? And when
Yeah.
you're looking for that from somebody, and youth leaders or people like in ministry authority don't see that need, and they don't pour into you, right?
Right.
I began to hurt more. And so
Yeah.
I began to see that in different youth that would come into our ministry. And I would always try to pour into them, because I know what that feeling feels like. And
Yeah.
that's how I began to heal, because I'm like, now one more person needs to go down this journey while I
Right.
am in their life. Now,
Right.
granted, were they probably like, oh, Miss Andrea, you be a raggedy. They better not have called me raggedy. Y'all fight them. But a lot of them, like, didn't.
Yeah.
They might have just been like, oh, it's fine. But I like to trust that at least I
Yeah.
planted that seed for them to
Yes.
realize I will never shame you like that. And I
Yeah.
was healed knowing that I was at least serving in that way.
Yeah.
What would you say is something that helped you heal, and what would you say is something that maybe some listeners can do to heal if they've been hurt by the church?
I think for me, give yourself time to grieve, baby. I cried. I wept. I just felt it.
Yeah.
Don't push it away. Because when you push it away, it's going to come back and it's going to
Yes.
hit you like a tidal wave out of this world. Honor the hurt, allow yourself to grieve,
Yeah.
and when you're ready, because nobody could force you to do this,
Yeah.
forgive. Forgive. Because forgiveness is not for them, forgiveness is for you. So that
Yeah.
you can move forward with your life,
Yeah.
so that you can get the blessings that deserve.
Yeah.
Because when you don't forgive, there's hatred builds, anger builds, and what do we know about that? It gets you nowhere.
Yeah.
Nowhere at all.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you won't be mad at these people,
Right.
but don't let that linger
Yeah.
for too long.
Yeah. And
Because you don't want to be drinking that poison expecting them to die, and you the one slowly
Hello.
killing yourself. So,
Hello.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you said forgiveness because a lot of times you have to forgive people for apologies you will never receive.
Okay.
So, and
Okay.
if you are so caught up on getting an apology, why don't you create one in your head on behalf
Okay.
of them so that you can
Yeah.
forgive them? And
Yeah.
sometimes you have to do that so that you are freed from that. And
That's right.
again, when you forgive them, that does not mean that they have access to you anymore. You allow that. You
That's
allow
right.
whether they have access to you. You don't have to friend
That's
them
right.
on Facebook. Heck, you can block them. I am team block all the time. You don't even have to say hello.
That's right.
You don't have to say a
That-
thing. You
that is
have
right.
to you speak to yourself in that moment. You decide what you
Yeah.
want to do. And if you feel like you're at the place of healing and forgiveness where you can actually say hello to that person, do what feels good to you.
Yeah.
Do what feels good to you. Yeah.
Yeah. And y'all, if you feel like you need some help with this, because there's a lot of people that have been abused by people of the church,
Yeah.
please go see a therapist. Maybe go
Please.
specifically see a trauma therapist
Please.
to help you process through that and just really reevaluate the situation. Because they can teach you some tools on how to finally move forward and heal that,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So that's how you take your power back.
There you go. There you go. Well, what's our call to action this week?
Honey, the call to action is, what was your favorite part about this episode?
All
We
of it.
talked about a lot. What was your favorite part about this episode? You know, so, and of course, I got to give the numbers.
Give the numbers, girl. Give them. Give 'em.
So for anyone that is going through a hard time, please, first, if it's an emergency and you trying to harm yourself or harm someone, call 911. But secondly, call the National Suicide Line at 800-273-8255. And if you live in Georgia, the Crisis and Access Line is 1-800-715-4225. And the crisis text line, yes, guys, there's the text line. So if you don't feel like calling, you can actually text somebody at NAMI, N-A-M-I, to 741-741 to connect with a trained crisis counselor that you can talk to them 24/7. Ain't that wonderful? We're going to need to find the Houston line too, Andrea,
Yes, we
for all
are.
our Houston listeners.
Yes, yes, yes. I will get y'all
We're going to have to
connected
find that.
on our next podcast. Until then,
Yes.
please use Google.
Yeah, use Google.
Use Google.
Yes.
Yes.
And please follow our Instagram page
Please,
at
please,
Two
please.
Therapists Pod. And we
Yes.
we on YouTube, Two Therapists Pod. And we got a TikTok.
Yes, we do. Now we ain't
That's
got
right.
no up to date content on there, but all of our content is on the gram, and our full episodes are always on YouTube. So make sure you
Yes.
check it out. Like every Monday, that's when we're dropping episodes. But follow us and let us know what you think about
Yes.
our episodes. We want to hear from y'all too.
Yes. Give us feedback. Give it to us so we can
Yes.
grow and evolve and be better.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, until next time, y'all. Bye.
Bye.